Good afternoon, and welcome to another Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. I'm your host, Michael Kernodle, and I have the pleasure of speaking with today's educator, which is none other than Alejandro Arenas, and the topic is thinking in slow motion, tips for efficient and effective practice sessions. So we all need great tips when it comes to rehearsing and practicing and working on our techniques and crafts. And I know Alejandro is going to give us a great session. You know, we do welcome everyone who's joining us live. If you have any questions, we would love to hear what you're thinking about, what's on your mind, even during the session. Just go into that chat feature and type your question, and we're going to leave some time at the very end where we'll be able to answer any of those awesome questions. We love those. And just to remind you, if you enjoyed today's session, you can always go to our archives at clearwaterjazz.com/education. And these sessions are free. So we want to share these. So we also want you to share as well. And we couldn't do this without our sponsors. So please be sure to check out the studio archives of the past sessions. And that's brought to you by Blue Water Wealth Management at Stewart Partners and Duke Energy. As well, check out our Young Lions podcast, available wherever you stream, and that's brought to you by our friends over there at Marine Max Clearwater. Just search Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. I mean, where do I start? Alejandro has given us so many great sessions here with our virtual sessions. I mean, he did sessions as bass styles, an approach to playing swing, funk, and more. Fun with the ranging. That was a great one. He also did our What I Love About series, like Wilbur Ware and several other artists, Oscar Peterson, and you name it. He's Oscar Pettiford. He's done many of those sessions. You can check him out in the archives. And if you don't know who Alejandro is, he was born in Colombia. You've probably seen him in the Tampa Bay area with that award-winning group, La Lucha, where he co-leads them. He holds a bachelor's degree in jazz performance and a master's of music from the University of South Florida. In addition to that, he's an adjunct professor for the Mirror program at St. Petersburg College, where he's very active and he's performing throughout the community, throughout the world. You've seen him on many stages with many artists, But before we go any further, just want to say, Alejandro, guess what? The stage is all yours.
Thank you so much, Michael. So today's session is going to be a little bit about a topic I'm very passionate about, which is something that I wish I would have been more aware of when I was starting to play music, which is kind of your mindset when you're playing, and how more so of your mental space where you are when you're practicing. And the way I'm titling this is Thinking in Slow Motion, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But to me, it's very important. Like I said, I mentioned it was. I wish this would have had more weight on my musical education, because so much of what we do is mental. A lot of what we do is just it's here. You know, we're performers. We are in a mental space where we need to be focused, and we need to. There's a lot going on when we're performing. When you think about everything that you're doing, just not just playing your instrument, but the type of music you're playing, the changes, the time, everything. I mean, there's a lot of things going on when we perform that, to a certain extent, I think we take for granted how incredible is what we get to do and what we're capable of doing. I mean, humans in general, just any specialized profession that humans have are in general, when you kind of break it down, it's pretty incredible what we're able to do. But obviously we're going to focus on music today. But I'm going to share a little bit of PowerPoint here. There's going to be a lot of talking, of course, because this has to do with like I said, the mindset and how to approach, how to get into that mindset, not only perform in your practice session, but also performing, and how it's all connected. To me, everything in music is just, it's connected. So I'll get a little bit more deep into that. So I'm going to share this PowerPoint here. And we'll just have some fancy titles here. So, thinking in slow motion, tips for an efficient and effective practice session. So, what do I mean by thinking in slow motion? So, it doesn't really mean that you are thinking slow, because when slow and thinking are usually not seen as a good thing. But I don't mean to think slow or be slow of thinking, but to slow things down so you can see them more clearly. Think of a movie, a slow motion, maybe like an action scene in a movie where everything is in slow motion. You can see the detail more clearly. You can see a lot of things that you would miss if everything was happening in real time. And yes, you may get the whole idea of what's going on, but when you slow things down, when you have the slow motion, you are much more aware. You can see the action and all the details without slowing down your own thinking. So in a way, you can see it as being able to speed up your perception and therefore your reaction time, meaning you can see what's unfolding, the action that's unfolding, and you have this chance to kind of like analyze it as it is unfolding. Obviously, it has to be happening slow, and slow motion doesn't happen in real life. But we have ways to kind of work towards that, which is I'm going to talk about. But, so basically you become more deeply aware of what's going on at the moment. Right, so that's kind of what I mean by thinking in slow motion. When you're picturing that slow motion scene happening and how you can see things clearly happening. To kind of some of the younger generation may not be as aware of this movie. I guess they did a new part, the Matrix, but there's a part where everything's happening very quickly, but Neo, the protagonist of the movie, is able to kind of anticipate everything and see it before, kind of react to it. So that's, obviously, we're not talking about a superhuman or crazy superpowers here, but let's see, how does this apply to music? What am I talking about? So, our minds work very quickly, and we are, for the most part, pretty adept at multitasking. An example of this is really the smartphone generation. We have in one device, we have a lot of things that we can do. We're literally multitasking in the device, but also the world just seems to be moving faster. When you look at the internet, people's attention spans are shorter, and things have sped up. Like there's videos, like compare like a viral video, like a TikTok video these days to like what was happening in YouTube 10 years ago. It's considerably faster. Like you see a musician's feed on Instagram, they teach like lessons in 30 seconds, and it's kind of crazy. And obviously we have to slow things down to really perceive everything that's going on, but the way the information is thrown at us is very fast. So this, I like to compare this to being in a performance. When you are playing, especially jazz, because of the improvisational nature, it requires us to have deep awareness, not only of our part in a group, but also of what the other musicians are doing, what the other people we're performing with, because there's a lot going on, right? So we have to be looking out for cues, possible chord substitutions if you're playing without charts, rhythmic hits or pushes that may be happening in the moment are not indicated in a chart. Who's soloing when, if somebody points at you and says like, we're going to trade 4s or 8s, or, you take the melody and the head out, modulations, long open vamps that you don't know when they're going to end, endings that nobody knows how they're going to happen, etc. There's a lot of stuff going on. So music requires us to multitask. We really have to be aware of a lot of things that are going on the stage at that particular moment. In what I called earlier, having that deep awareness. So what I mean by deep awareness for me, these are my terms. This is the way I see it. And again, some of this stuff may not apply to you. You may perceive music in a different way, but this is stuff that applies to me, and from talking to other musicians that are like-minded, is stuff that applies to them as well. So the deep awareness of something is really being in the moment. You're not disconnected from what's happening. Now, deep awareness does not mean that you're thinking about every single note that you're playing. It really means that you're in this odd zone of sorts where you are there, but you're also not there. I know that sounds a little esoteric, but it makes sense. Once you're in that zone, it's kind of like you are working not at your maximum ability. Like, you don't feel you're working hard. You're just kind of become part of the environment at that moment, but you're aware of everything that's going on. And sometimes your ear are much more aware than you know they are. So it's really amazing. That's one of the things that happens, how jazz musicians interact, how all of a sudden you guys, like, you play these hits together you have not agreed to play, but everybody just felt the phrase that way, or play an ending a certain way. And yes, a lot of that is knowing the language of the music. There's a lot of common language that we can, like playing an ending like a okay, that's a go-to ending that most people will know to play. But there's a lot of nuances that are happening at that moment. So having the right mindset when performing is very important. You can't be disconnected. You can't be thinking of, I don't know, what you're going to eat tonight when you're in the middle of a performance. You want to be aware that you're there and that you are in the middle of a performance. Again, that doesn't mean you have to you don't have to feel like you're working really hard either, because sometimes you can overthink things, which is I'm going to talk about. So I talk here, that's why I put slow the music down to stay ahead. I like to use the term, well, actually, I like to borrow kind of a phrase from sports. It's like a sports cliche in a way, which is, you can hear sometimes when an athlete is performing really well, they use the phrase that they're able to slow the game down, or they're not letting the game speed up on them. And I've always been fascinated with that, because I found an analogy between the sports. I'm a big baseball fan, and it's the perception is that it's the slow sport, but it's very deliberate. When the pitcher is pitching, there's something very specific the pitcher's trying to do, and it's a mind game with the hitter who's trying to guess what the pitcher's going to throw him. And kind of like that slowing the game down, another analogy they use in baseball sometimes is that he's seeing the ball, like when a hitter's hitting really well, that he's seeing the ball as big as a beach ball or something like that, like meaning he's really seeing things very clearly. And I always like that, he's slowing the game down or not letting the game speed up on him or her, because like I said, there's an analogy into music there. Because it's that mindset. I like to use the term to stay ahead and out of your head. Meaning, right, you are anticipating what's coming. You are not being reactive when you're on the stage. You are being proactive with the band. You have found that zone where you are part of the music. You are seeing what's coming at you before it hits you, in a sense. And being able to kind of slow things down in that sense, or I mean, you could think about it this way as speeding your mind up too, if you want to think about it that way. But we tend to have the tendency to think about slowing things down. So I'm going to confess something myself. I probably don't practice as often as I should. You know, this is probably something that applies to most adult musicians that have a lot of gigs, and families, because a lot of the times what happens is that you have other responsibilities, and sometimes your only chance to practice is music that you have to learn for a gig. You know, you can be in a situation too where you have kind of steady gigs and you get a chance to practice for that, but a lot of times you have concerts to practice with. And that's where the whole practice environment of being able to slow things down really comes into being very important. So the thing is, as musicians, the more we know about the music, the more we tend to micromanage what we practice. The problem sometimes, so meaning, you know, we say like, well, my time sucks, so I'm going to just focus on practicing time. Or, you know, or I suck at the changes on this song, I'm just going to play the changes on this. Or, you know, I'm just going to practice soloing. I'm going to practice improvising. But the problem with that, that's great, and you should do that. But also, it's also time consuming. And I am of the philosophy of being able to connect everything you practice to the bigger picture. Of course, when we're micromanaging aspects of our performance, we want to put them inside the bigger picture, but at the same time, we want to be able to see the big picture while we're doing it. You know, because sometimes people can get really good at one specific thing and not be as well versed in others. And that's entirely up to your personal preference on what it is that your goal is with music. You know, if you want to be the most versatile musician in the world, then you want to learn a bunch of different styles and a bunch of different things. But if you want to do your own thing that it's entirely yours, then you focus on that. You know, I'm talking more from the sideman perspective on being a working musician and really being able to work as much as possible in a sense. So the way I found myself in situations like this, in fact, this past couple of weeks there were like 3 or 4 different artists that were coming through town. They all had different music. They all had different charts. And I had to really study the music. So one of the things that I did, and I'm going to go to the next slide here. It'll sit here for a little bit. But one of the things that, this is the way I try to practice. So again, kind of the bigger picture of how you perceive everything that is connected. So learning songs, learning complete pieces of music is great. That's basically what we want to do, right? As musicians, we want to perform. Right, within one piece of music, there's a ton of things that you can learn in order to become better at something. So for example, let's say that you're being called to play a samba groove on a song and you're not very good at playing a samba groove. Then this is your perfect opportunity to really nail it down and really be able to put that as make that part of your musical arsenal, not just learn it for the concert. I like this analogy too of if you're a student, you know, you've studied for tests before where you have memorized stuff just for the test and then you forget about it. You can do the same thing with music. You can learn the music for a performance where you're just basically the next day you don't remember much about it. But, you know, I don't think you're going to experience as much growth. You know, like I personally don't like to be glued to charts. I know if it's like a reading gig, I don't, you know, I have to do it. But for the most part, if I can memorize certain aspects of the charts that I can look around and be aware of what's going on around me, I'd rather do that. And I've actually found that it saves me time. It's better for me to look at something and say, I'm going to memorize this unison line I'm playing with the piano, as opposed to trying to read it on the bandstand. And this go along with some of the things that I'm going to talk about here. But, seek any opportunity to learn new music as a way of growing. So the way I would break this down in terms of practicing this slowing down idea, or thinking in slow motion, is the obvious statement of you can't run unless you learn how to walk first, right? If you've ever seen a child learn to walk, they do it very slowly. They keep falling and they keep, hurting themselves on occasion and all that stuff. And sometimes they stand up and they try to run and, they fall on their faces, and that happens. I think a lot of us tend to do that with a lot of things. But it's kind of, I see this with a lot of students, actually. They just try to play a line or a bass line or something at full speed right away. And the problem with that is that it's more difficult to do that, because yes, you might get away with it, but you may end up finding that there's going to be some deficiencies in your technique, and you may find also that you're going to be a little bit sloppy, and in the long run you may find that it may cause you, specifically thinking of like upright bass or electric bass, you may find that may cause you some physical issues. I am dealing with that myself, and I'm trying to fix certain bad habits that I have with my technique. And this whole idea of slowing down and breaking things down is very important for that. It can be frustrating because sometimes we just want to get it. So I'll talk about it. So slow down and break things down. So let's put that into a specific mindset. Well, literally just slow it down. So here's the tricky thing about slowing things down. And we're just talking about tempo now. If you have a certain phrase that you're trying to learn, let's say that you're working on a bebop melody for a song, those tend to be fairly tricky in really any instrument, but on bass they tend to be particularly tricky because of the nature of the instrument. So what I try to think of doing that is just breaking it down in phrases, right? So you take the first phrase, you get it under your fingers, then you move on to the next phrase, you get that under your fingers. You don't necessarily have to do them in the logical order. You could just say like, okay, here's my first phrase, here's my second phrase. Let's learn to play them independently first, and then let's put them together. And so on and so forth. I think it's always good when you're slowing, even if you're slowing things down, to always play them in a musical way. In fact, you want to slow it down so you can kind of play it at a steady tempo, but not at the tempo that you ultimately want to play it at. Now, personally, to talk about specific examples, I've figured out that when I'm learning bebop melodies, my issues tend to be in the connecting notes of phrases sometimes. I tend to get a little bit sloppy. And so what I try to do is focus on the middle, on the notes, on the last few notes and of the first phrase and the first few notes of the next phrase. So play them in such a way that I'm practicing the transition. Not necessarily playing the whole entire phrase and then the second phrase, but then just focusing on those, maybe it could be like a one beat or two beats that I'm concentrating on, and really kind of getting that under my fingers so that transitional space can be taken care of. and I can move from phrase to phrase in a more logical and more efficient way. So that's a way that you can slow things down and really, like I said, sometimes it takes more time to try to get it. If you try to play it at the original tempo or not very much under, it takes longer to learn it that way in the long run. So kind of like think about that. Learn to walk before running. Then be excited about practicing, but specifically be excited to recognize your weaknesses. I know that sounds weird because we don't like to talk about the things that we're not good at. But the beauty of music is that if we are able to recognize those things and accept them, then that gives us direction. That gives us a specific idea of what to practice, something that we can focus on and say, like, man, I want to get better at this. Let me do this. And like I said, this can be an area where you micromanage what you're practicing, and that's okay. Like I said, there's no the tips I'm giving here are not a one size fits all type of situation, but it's a good idea. If you're in a rut practicing or anything like that, it's a good idea to apply some of this stuff. Everybody practices differently. This is something that works for me. So, being able to recognize your weaknesses and be excited about working on your weaknesses is a great way of giving yourself direction on what to practice. I think a lot of the times we grab an instrument, we start playing without direction. And I know a lot of students come to me with that very same issue. They're like, I find myself practicing the same stuff, or I don't know where to start. And I think recognizing your weaknesses is a great way to start. So an example of something that I did for like an entire summer when I was in college was every day I would start. There's a book called The Evolving Bassist by Rufus Reed, and he has like 15 pages of rhythmic exercises with open strings. And that's the first thing I would do. I would just play through those exercises and every day. And that helped me with my rhythmic accuracy. It helped me with my time. It helped with my reading. Again, I wasn't just working on one thing. And I remember when we went back that fall to school, people started commenting that my time was much better. So that was a deliberate choice I made of saying, you know what, I've ignored a lot of things about my playing. Let me work on them. More recently, I've been working on this duo, which is bass and vocals. And that has forced me to really come to terms with a lot of weaknesses on my playing, things that I've been wanting to work for years. And it's been great because I get excited about that challenge. So don't be afraid of accepting your weaknesses and recognizing them. That's the only way we're going to improve, really. But also don't be down on yourself, recognizing weaknesses and that you're not good at a specific thing, that doesn't mean that you are a bad musician. It's just an area that you need to work on, and that's it. So definitely be good to yourself. I mean, like I said, a lot of what we do is mental. So we just got to be in the right mindset. If you go to the gig or to your practice sessions thinking, I suck, that's not the right mindset. You're just going to suck because that little voice is going to be there. I'm sure we all deal with that little voice in our head telling us, you suck, or, you're not, kind of playing down our worth as musicians and sometimes as people too. So if you get a chance, try to shut that down and move on and concentrate on the work that you have to do. This goes along with the next point of think right and have the right mindset when performing. That's exactly what I was talking about, getting in that zone where you are able to kind of anticipate what's coming and you're able to think of, if you have like a unison line that's coming up, you're playing a walking bass line, and then there you have like this unison line that happens, 4 bars in the middle of like the phrase, then kind of anticipate what's coming, this kind of goes with this, the practice thinking ahead. When you're practicing this on your own, practice performing. That's one of the good things about using a metronome for practice, regardless of whether you're using it for rhythmic accuracy or not. It kind of forces you to go with it. So if you are able to anticipate and hear what something's going to sound like before you play it, you're going to be much more accurate. And you're not going to trip over yourself. This applies to both maybe a written line that you're playing or something you're improvising. It applies both ways. Now, one thing this is kind of what got me started thinking about this. It's getting reacquainted with your instrument. What I mean by that is when you get really busy playing, you could be a college student that has a lot of work at school, be it music or anything. That happened to me, my first semester, there were few bass players and one of them got hurt. So I immediately got put into 5 completely different ensembles, and it was very stressful. And it's funny because it was the application exactly of this. I was taking bass lessons and I needed to work on improving on my instrument, but I also needed to practice the music for the gigs. And I needed to find a way to kind of make it work. And I don't think I did it as efficiently back then. I got by, but again, it was kind of one of those practice to pass the test type of situation, or study to pass the test type of situation. So, but one of the things that I find myself, I have 3 kids, I have a family, I gigging, 4 or 5 nights a week, sometimes with very different people, very different music. And, I have all the responsibilities as an adult. I teach as well. So sometimes I don't get a chance to practice, like I said earlier in my confession, to practice as much as I should. But I like to do this, which is, like I said, get reacquainted with your instrument, which is basically I just sit down with my bass and play just simple stuff, even just sometimes just playing long tones and just kind of like, I wrote here, hello, it's like, hello, baby, I know I haven't been home, but, you're reacquainting yourself with your baby. And that to me is really important, because sometimes I feel like the instrument betrays me at gigs. It's not, I can't blame the instrument. I can only blame myself. But sometimes it's kind of like, yeah, you haven't been taking care of your relationship with the instrument beyond just the gigs. And that can come to bite me. I start realizing the way it translates really is technique. Like my elbow tends to drop, my fingers get lazy, my intonation gets more affected. And I have very simple exercises that I go back and do when I find myself in that situation. One of them, this is my electric bass. I do this on upright, but one of the things that I do is, sorry if that's noisy, it's for intonation. I use iReal Pro, which is the, you can get it for your iPhone or Android phone. And I put a play along of just chords going up chromatically. So it can be just major chords or dominant chords, or, if I want to practice the modes this way. But it's basically just one weakness that I found in my playing was chromatic chords that are of the same quality that are moving chromatically up or down. So what I started doing was trying to fix that in a way that would help me with shifting on the upright. So I would play one scale up. Oops. Trying to think like an upright. And then one scale down, descending. Well, and so on and so forth. So I can send a link to that when this is posted, but that's a very simple exercise, which is just one scale up, one scale down, going up chromatically. And then I do it descending as well, starting on the upper register of the instrument and then going down. And those are really, you just sometimes just sit there and play scales slowly, play arpeggios, play things like that, and when you're practicing, just stay relaxed but focused. So avoid the wall. The wall to me was, as I'm talking about being an adult, I think there was a certain age that I got to where I found myself in finding that everything that I practiced or tried to learn was a lot more difficult to do. And it coincided with adult responsibilities. Because my mindset, my focus during the day, when I was in high school, I focused pretty much only on playing, which made me a bad student academically, but, I advanced pretty quickly musically speaking. So, but then I remember there was a point where I kind of hit the wall and everything was so difficult. I got so frustrated with myself. Because I wasn't getting it. I wasn't getting something as quickly as I used to be able to get it. But don't let that affect you. You just gotta, at that point where you're practicing something, just walk away from the instrument, get a little break, and then go back with a fresh head to do it. Everything that's worthwhile takes time. And yes, sometimes you have the pressure of a gig that you have to play. Sometimes you have a lot of things that don't give you enough time to do that. But try to, again, slow things down and find a time in your own head. Focus practice and recurrent or practicing often is, to me, much more valuable than practicing 8 hours a day and then not practicing for 2 weeks. Because you can get too much information in your head that way, So, when I'm preparing for some of the gigs that they send me charts ahead of time, I try to just go through the songs. The first thing I do is I actually just look at the charts, see what's the most difficult, and knowing what's going to take me more time to work on. Then, I prioritize those, and I try to run them a little bit every day. I don't spend a ton of time, but just running a little bit every day at least gives me that repetition. And not like that practicing it 10 times in one day repetition, but practicing 10 times over 10 days repetition, which allows you to reset. And, it's actually a good thing because you get to think. You go to the real world and think of whatever gig you have that night and then go back to it. So having that ability to abandon something you're really focused on and then going back to it and refocus on it is good. Because sometimes you may find when you're practicing that you're really, really, really focused on something and then you go do something else and then, you don't have those 3 hours to get back into that super focused space. So try to kind of do that from the very beginning. Put away your phone, put away anything that you don't need to have at the moment of practicing. Be it that you're only going to practice 10 minutes, make sure it's focused practice. And remember that you are in control of this. It's all in your head. A lot of it is in your head. If you've practiced your scales, if you practice your technique and you've practiced your stuff, a lot of what you have to practice is that mindset. Like I said, stay ahead and out of your head. Shut that little voice, especially when you're on stage. You don't need anybody telling you suck. You don't need yourself telling you suck when you're on the stage. And just stay ahead, be aware and be proactive with the band and kind of listen to what's coming up. It's like I said, you can think of this whole concept as, speed up your thinking. But to me, the slowing down aspect of it comes from taking a second to think. With my band La Lucha, that's something that happens to us where we are at gigs and we're playing things at gigs, but we're making it happen, but we realize certain things are getting sloppy. So it's at that moment that we say like, hey guys, let's get together for a rehearsal and work the kinks out of this stuff. Like I feel like we're rushing this, or I think we're dragging this. And it's awesome because as a group, we get to sit down and work out the little things. And next time we play it is so much better, but we don't have to be rehearsing the entire time. So again, this is a concept that you can apply. Again, to me, you can apply universally, not just to your own playing, but when you're teaching or anything in life really. But slowing down is okay sometimes. It's kind of like gather yourself. It's a second to say, okay. It's almost like meditation. If you've ever had any sort of meditation, it's like meditating about what it is that you're doing. So that's basically it. I could talk about this forever, but that is the basic idea of what this is about. It's just slow down, try to stay ahead of everything and enjoy practicing. Again, sometimes you have gigs that you have to practice for, and try to make the most out of those gigs. Having that opportunity to learn new music and everything is a great way to give direction to yourself as to what to practice, and really working on some stuff that you may not be as good at, having that challenge and everything. So that's the concept of thinking in slow motion.
Alejandro, what an awesome concept of thinking slow motion. I know so many of us stay in our head about how does this sound, and you want to compare yourself to others. But man, I love all those different steps with just taking things slow. And a lot of this stuff is mental, right? But
Yeah.
if we can just get out of our head and yet have the preparation, like you said. I mean, preparation is preparation. Even before the gig, I've seen situations like that. Like I always tell everybody, be on time, be comfortable. It's nothing like getting to a gig late and everything is
Oh,
off. That is the worst. And
absolutely.
things happen, but the more preparation, more calm and, prepared we can be, I know we're going to enjoy those performances even more. We want to thank you so much for this session. We want to thank everyone who joined us today live. I just want to remind you, there's so much more coming your way, and all the upcoming free sessions will be posted on our website, www.clearwaterjazz.com/education. And one thing we love is hearing back from our listeners. We love feedback. You can tell us how much you enjoyed this session with Alejandro. You can tell us maybe a topic we've never covered that you would love to hear. Well, just email us at info@clearwaterjazz.com, and we would love to hear from you. I've been your host, Michael Kernodle. This has been Alejandro Arenas, and we have enjoyed this session. But until next time, everybody, keep it swinging, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Have an awesome day.